Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar on working with internal and external coaches. I'm Kathy, and Catherine is also here with me today. Very much interested in providing you some great information in our quick 30 minutes together and also answering your questions. To make it easy for you, whatever questions you do have, feel free to type them into the question panel on your screen. Hopefully we'll easily incorporate those questions as we go through the presentation, and then also we'll be taking them directly and responding to them. We're excited to have you here, and we're excited about your interest working with both internal and external coaches. To jump into what we're going to be covering today, I'd like to share our agenda with you. So we're going to start by some basic definitions, talking about what a coach is and what an internal coach is versus external. We're going to discuss the pros and cons of using internal coaches and the pros and cons of using external coaches, because there definitely are both of each. We'll be getting into some of your considerations as far as whether you want an internal coach, an external coach, how to run that, use those together, those kinds of things. We've got some tips for you, and then, of course, very interested in providing resources for you. So diving into our definition, I'm going to start today with the definition of what a coach is. And this comes straight from the International Coach Federation. An executive, career, business, or life coaching. And we have coaches that do each or more than one of those. It is a strategic partnership in which the coach empowers the client to clarify goals, create action plans, move past obstacles, and achieve what the client chooses. And I love that definition because it means it really is about empowering that individual to be engaged, to increase their own productivity, and to really own what they're accomplishing. So great definition of coaching. Now, in terms of an internal versus an external coach, let's make it really simple, really easy. An internal coach is an employee of the company where the coaching is being done. So an organization determines people that would make good coaches and set that up as part of their job. Alternatively, an external coach is an independent business person with whom an agreement is established to provide coaching services. So companies then go, okay, yeah, which one do I want? Which one makes sense? Very often it's a blend, so we'll get into that. Now, there are a couple of other definitions that I think are really pertinent. So as you're going through a coaching program, what do these mean to you? So first off, the client is the person being coached. And the sponsor is the company, the organization, whatever the entity is, that is paying for and or arranging for the coaching services to be provided. So the company is the sponsor. This is important to understand. It comes straight from the International Coach Federation Code of Ethics. And the reason this is important to understand is because of confidentiality. Some of the ethics talk about confidentiality of client information. And in the workplace, sometimes that's a question or a challenge. Guys, how do we handle that? Because that's company information. Oh, wait a minute, it's from a coaching session, the confidentiality. So it's definitely an awareness point, whether you're working with internal or external coaches or a combination of the two. Now, from there, let's talk about some pros and cons. And we're going to discuss internal coaches, and we'll talk about external. So if you've got an internal coach, what are the pros to that? Well, first off, it's a soft cost. These are employees of your company. They're employees of the organization. They're already there. They're already on the payroll, and they have jobs that they're doing. So the cost of having them coach is definitely soft. It's simply incorporated in the time of what they do. They are accessible to the employees. They work there, so they're on hand and immediately available. That's a great thing. They know the company culture, and they know the people. So when they're working with somebody and that individual's talking about something, they get it right away. Zero need for explanation. They know what's going on there. And it supports creating a coaching culture. Within a company, this is, of course, very hot, probably one of the things you're interested in yourself, and that's part of the reason you're here. Coaching is a key development tool. When you have training and development in an organization, you want coaching to be part of that program. And having internal coaches supports creating a coaching culture throughout the organization. Now, on the con side for internal coaches, confidentiality. So I'll give you an example. If the coach is actually also part of the human resource department, well, human resources has a little code of ethics. They have responsibilities, legal obligations in terms of what the records are, where they're kept, and how they're kept. And some of that is really different from what happens with coaching confidentiality. So in an organization, this becomes one of the considerations. You know, how are we handling that information? How are we separating coaching confidentiality from confidentiality of the organization information? So it's definitely a consideration. And for clients being coached, it's a consideration. Another con is sometimes there are internal conflicts. Scheduling the people, it depends on what their job is, what their role is. Sometimes it depends on how much work they have, maybe a big project is coming down the pike, and all of a sudden, all their time's got to go there, and it's no longer available to do the coaching with the individual. So that can be a factor. You may also have internal conflicts. They'll work together, and bottom line is conflict happens in the workplace. And so if there is a conflict between the coach and maybe some of the people that they are coaching, or some of the people those people are tied to, it can create issues. Another con is sometimes they have biases. So, for example, they may have a bias in terms of how the company does something, what direction the company is taking, how individuals do their jobs, those kinds of things. They're very closely tied in, and so that's a normal, natural thing. Another is the competing priorities. They may have their own agenda in terms of what they want happening, and that can compete with what's going on with the client. So definite pros and cons to having an internal coach. Well, the same is true of an external coach. On the pro side of an external coach, they have very specific training and coaching expertise. External coaches, very often companies are asking for this, have become members of the International Coach Federation, for example. They have gone through certification programs, and this is what they do. This is what they do full time. They're all about the coaching, and so they really have developed that coaching expertise. Another pro is the standards and the ethics. When you hire an external coach, you can have that expectation that, for example, if they're part of the International Coach Federation, not only do they agree to abide by the code of ethics, they're actually accountable to it. If they're working with a company that provides coaches, they're going to be required to meet those ethics. And so that's in place. Well, they've had the training on them, and they're signed on to that code of ethics. So that's an excellent pro. Another one is that they'll have experience specific to a role. So, for example, in a company, the person doing the coaching may or may not get the particular job of the person being coached. When you bring in an external coach, they very often have highly developed expertise in terms of what the specific roles are within the organization. Another benefit, they bring different perspectives. So it's a fresh set of eyes, if you will, a whole different outlook, a whole different understanding of what's going on. And that adds tremendous value when you're brainstorming, when you're looking for perspective, when you're challenging thinking or expanding thinking. It's a huge benefit to have somebody with fresh eyes involved in it. And then when you have to address a sensitive issue, very often it's difficult for somebody internally to tell a senior level leader in the organization, hey, you've got a behavior that's creating a problem or an issue here. So addressing those sensitive issues is a definite benefit of an external coach. Now, on the con side, sourcing a coach, it can be a challenge to find the right external coach. So doing the work involved there. Scheduling the coaching, because at that point, then you're dealing with whoever's being coached, how much time you're going to pay for coaching, how that's being coordinated, etc. So, a little side tip on that one. Obviously, if the company gives the external coach the parameters of what's allowed, then it's up to the external coach to work directly with the client as far as scheduling. Makes it a lot easier than having it go through the department handling the coaching program. Another thought is just the logistics of coordinating it. When you have that external coach, you got to figure out how are we handling reporting, billing, all of those kinds of things. And then the cost. External coaches are more expensive, and you're paying for those directly from the bottom line as compared to it being a soft cost. So pros and cons for each. Now, a little bit just straight up insight. Ultimately, as an organization, you're going to be best served by having a combination of internal and external coaches. There's a tremendous amount of research on this. The American Management Association has a fabulous publication out. I'm going to share a few of the quotes from it with you right now to give you some insight on this. You want, as a company, both internal and external coaches. So from that American Management Association publication, here's a couple of things they said. Working with an external coach is significantly related to a successful coaching experience, regardless of the coachee's level in the organization. Well, that's powerful in and of itself. That's telling you that those external coaches are getting results in a whole new level, in a whole new way. So very, very significant. Now, equally significant, using an internal coach is significantly related to coaching success, only when it's used for supervisors or all employees. So at the lower levels of employment in the organization, so more of your entry-level positions, team lead, supervisor level, and you want to have coaching available to everyone down there. So that's very, very important to consider. Now, another statement from the American Management Association report, the internally based methods of providing training were less strongly related with overall coaching success than were externally based methods, even though the internally based methods are more commonly used. So one of the drawbacks of the internal coaches is that frequently their training is limited to internal training within the organization, and they really are missing out on developing their expertise. So good thing to be aware of can be addressed. Another consideration, again, American Management Association, despite the difference between coaching and many other types of training programs, the wisest course of action is to view coaching as part of a larger development process. So what does that mean to you? That means within a training and development effort of the organization as a whole, when you think about organizational development, you want coaching to be part of that. Is it a separate program? No, it's part of the overall effort for developing the employees and bringing them up. Now, a couple of best practices tips that come out of those quotes. You want to work with both internal and external coaches. You want to use external training for your internal coaches, and incorporate your coaching program with your training and development efforts. A little bit more for you to consider. Gallup poll. More than 1 million people in the U.S. Number one reason they quit their job is a bad boss or an immediate supervisor. Supporting that is a business news report that said 84% of workers wanted to quit their job. And that was during 2011 when we were experiencing a down economy. Now, what is the reason this is significant insight to us? How come we're talking about that right now? Well, it all goes back to that coaching. So think about what happens. When you have a coaching program, you're developing the skills that address those issues. Very specifically, you're developing communication skills because coaching includes listening, assertive language, and questioning. When you're training the coach, they're learning those skills. When that coach works with a client, they're developing those skills in that client. The same is true of people skills, recognizing and flexing to different personality styles. And then also goal setting, having an effective process so that the people really buy into it. It creates the change and it motivates their follow-through. Well, coaches develop these competencies. They learn these skills and they develop them. When they work with individual clients, as a result, the clients are developing this as well. And so it's very, very powerful in terms of addressing what's happening in the workplace. And I'm getting a question in. This is a good one. It says, are internal coaches always certified? And actually, the answer is most often, no. Most often, the internal coaches actually have very limited training. So some companies are starting to do a little bit of training. They're doing internal training most often, and unfortunately, that's what's actually least effective. So as far as a program within a company, you do want to have the internal coaches get external training. Bring in that training for them to really develop that skill set. So great question there. Okay, more for you. I've got a couple of tips. So when you're thinking about that coaching program and you want to work with both internal and external coaches, a couple of things. Number one, know the reasons for coaching. In other words, the idea of, oh, yeah, well, all the companies are doing it. Coaching is the buzzword. That's kind of the hot thing. It's more than that. What is the specific reason for having a coach? And you want to know that on an organizational level, and you want to know that on an individual level. What are you wanting to accomplish? This is important on the front end because it goes into how you set up the coaching relationship right from the very beginning. It's also significant that you create a coaching culture. And this speaks to having both internal and external coaches. You want the organization as a whole to have that attitude of that coaching. It supports employee engagement and it supports productivity. It supports talent retention, all long-term issues for companies. You do want to, we talked about this, train your internal coaches, and ideally you want an external training program for that, and you want to hire external coaches as well. What you're really doing there is deciding, okay, where am I using my internal coaches and where am I using my external coaches? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Specifically, when you have a coach and a client, the number one indicator of their success is the rapport between the coach and the client. So if you're going to set up a successful coaching relationship, a lot of it's going to be based on how well they get along. Beyond that, how do you match? How do you decide who should have an internal coach and who should have an external? Current best practices and what the Research American Management Association did tells us is that you want to have trained coaches internally, and you want them coaching your supervisors, your team leaders, all of your employees, make coaching available to them. That's creating that coaching culture throughout the organization. As far as external coaches, those are most successful when you bring them in for the highest levels of management and leadership in the organization. Now, of course, that makes sense in terms of cost as well, because having external coaches is more expensive. Does it make sense to bring them in for everybody? Well, one option if you want to do that is to group coaching. It definitely makes it more affordable to provide coaching for everyone in the organization. So as far as one-on-one coaching, bringing those external coaches, again, for your high-level leaders in the organization. That's where it's going to make the most sense. And when you look at the research, this is how you get the greatest success. Your internal coaches are available to all employees, and they're really targeting a lot of team leaders and supervisor levels, and then your external coaches are brought in for your high levels. Now, a couple more tips for you. You want to have a specific process for matching prospective coaches with each client. So whether you're using internal or external or both, you've got to start making some decisions. Who's going to be a possible coach for the possible individual? When you have an employee that is interested in having coaching services, how are you going to let them know what their choices are? If they do go to an internal coach, any of the employees, your team leads, your supervisors, do they get to choose which internal coach they can work with? And so you want a process for that. If you have the high-level management, how are you giving them choice? Are you working with just one coach and, hey, you're going to hire them and that's it? Or if you have a couple of coaches that you're working with and they can interview them and find out who they connect with and have that rapport with in terms of establishing that coaching relationship. And given how much of a factor the relationship is in the success of the coaching engagement, it's definitely a consideration. What that means for you is you really want to empower the client to choose your own coach, internal or external. Now, of course, what their list of choices is going to depend on your budget and what the options you can give them. So it may be that you have an entry-level employee and really their only choices are internal coaches. It may be you get into the upper levels of management, they can actually choose from internal or external. And so they've got the option there. You encourage them to have a conversation and do a little bit of interviewing with people. So great opportunity there. You also want to be sure you're measuring the outcomes. So a minute ago, we talked about know the reasons for coaching. Well, that's going to support how you measure outcomes for the coaching relationship. You want to have a way of saying, okay, was this worth the time and the money we invested in it? Now, of course, and I love a question, one of the questions that came in, I've got a couple of them, so I want to make sure I answer all of them. One of the questions came in is, how do you measure the outcomes? And the big conversation that we often have is, okay, is it qualitative or is it quantitative? So there are some quantitative measures. You can measure productivity. You can measure retention. You can measure, actually, if you do 360s, for example, you can measure scores on different assessment tools you're using. Those are kinds of things you can measure quantitatively. On a qualitative level, boy, that gets challenging. And of course, one of the tremendous benefits of coaching is the qualitative side. It directly influences how people get along, which influences attitudes, engagement, and productivity. So some of those measures are a little more challenging. Sometimes research studies will assign a number based on, gosh, I totally agree or I somewhat agree, kind of scoring on those things. And then at the same time, you've got that where people are writing in and describing it. And so it is a qualitative measurement. You do want to be open to both. Have a little bit of quantitative, especially where that's possible. You also want to have your qualitative measures. I got the message for somebody that just joined. We will make a recording of today's webinar available on YouTube, and I will send a link out to everybody that registered. So you will have access to this after the fact. So, yeah, sorry to miss the beginning of it. I'm glad to have you here now.
Kathy, this is Catherine. If I could jump in for just 1 second. There's a really good study that perhaps we could make available to people that has some really good data on both quantitative and qualitative outcomes, and I think that the list of qualitative is particularly important. So perhaps, we could consider making that available to everybody.
Oh, absolutely, Catherine. I love that idea. Whether we attach it in the email that we send out to everybody with a link, or if we can give them a link to it, let's do it.
Great.
That's a great idea. And as a matter of fact, we could probably make a link to that American Management Association study available as well. So excellent idea. Give people that information. So we will work on including that when we email you after the webinar today with where you can see the recording of it. We'll give you access to those things as well. Excellent. All right, a couple of more pieces for you, a couple other thoughts. You really want to have both internal and external coaches for creating success with what you're doing with your coaching. You want to create that coaching culture by training and using your internal coaches, and you want to maximize your coaching outcomes by incorporating the external coaches. What's really significant about using both internal and external coaches? These considerations. They both support the same team. Your internal and your external coaches support your organization. They both support each other. You want your internal and external coaches connecting and collaborating, and you want them coordinating their efforts. So when you have that coaching program as part of your training and development initiative, that's there, it's happening. Everybody's working together. That's your ideal. Now, occasionally I get people say, well, yeah, except for sometimes they feel like they're competing with each other. And their response is, no, they're really not competing. If they are, it's probably the wrong myth, because both are essential to the long-term success of what you're doing, and they really are best served by working together and supporting each other. So you do want that happening. Now, I want to be available to you as a resource. Catherine wants to be available. We want to provide resources for you. So we're going to give you a couple of access to a couple of different reports in the email we send you from today. In addition to that, the Center for Coaching Solutions mission statement is to be the resource for coaching results. That means whether you want training, whether you want coaches, whether you just want support for what you're doing, consultants or coaches for your coaching program, it's there for you. As far as the training goes itself, the Center for Coaching Certification is available. Enhance your coach training experience with quality professionals and support. You can attend external programs, or you can have that program brought to your company when you have a large enough group. So those options are there for you. To further support you, we want to give you something right now. So both Catherine and I want to be available to you for a free 30-minute consultation. If you want to hire a coach, you're working with external coaches specifically, Catherine's going to be your go-to person. If you're interested in training coaches, I'll be your go-to person. So how do we get a hold of us? Here's our contact information. We're giving you our direct telephone line. Yeah, you can call the 800 numbers, or you can call us straight and get right to us. You've got our email addresses there, and then you've got the respective websites listed there. At this point, what I want to do is thank all of you for being here. I appreciate your time, your participation. We are pretty much at our 30-minute quick time slot for today's presentation. If you have additional questions, please let me know. We definitely want to answer those. Those of you that do have to leave and jump back into your day, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate your time, your participation. Definitely look forward to being of service to you, want to be available and be helpful. So thank you all. And Catherine, do come back in. Any other comments or thoughts you'd like to share?
Oh gosh, Kathy, I think at this point, nothing specific. I think this was a great session, and I hope everybody's found it very informative.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Catherine, and all of you that have joined us today. We appreciate you, appreciate your time and participation, and look forward to hearing from you in the near future. So thank you, everyone.